What is going on, everybody? Welcome into Studs and Duds, an NFL player review series where I'll be talking about the rising and falling players around the NFL via the lens of my own custom community Madden roster. Guys, if you are playing Madden 25 and you want to get the roster, just search That Franchise Guy in the file share. And I want to remind you guys as well, in my spare time, I do still do some streams and rebuilds and stuff on my Twitch and on my gaming channel, TFG Plays. Those links are in the description below if you want to go check that stuff out. But as we get started here, if you guys could do me a huge favor, take just a second to hit that like button. A lot goes into this series. It's not a big breadwinner for me on this channel, but I know that it is for you NFL diehards of this channel. And you loyal subscribers and fans of the channel are the lifeblood of this channel, so I'm more than happy to deliver for you guys. But if you could return the favor and just hit that like button, get this video in front of as many eyes as possible, I would really appreciate it. But without further ado, let's get started. So we'll start today's AFC West episode with the Denver Broncos. A lot of movement for the Broncos. It's a lot of low-level players. This was kind of Sean Payton's vision, right? Give a lot of different under-the-radar guys opportunities, and that's kind of what this series is all about, man. So it's going to be a fun team to break down here. We are going to start with a little bit more of a well-known player, but maybe not so much. Third-round pick from last year, cornerback Riley Moss is our super stud here today for the Broncos. Of all the things this team really needed heading into the year, I would say somebody to step up as CB2 on the opposite side of Pat Surtain, obviously, was at the top of the list. And, you know, they brought in Levi Wallace as some insurance there. And hey, a credit to Levi Wallace. He stepped in the game Pat Surtain missed and played well in that game. But it's just a different story to have a young 24-year-old, recent third-round pick with real upside to be a long-term answer opposite of Pat Surtain. And it really feels like they've found that in Riley Moss. Not to say he's been like shut down in coverage or anything like that. And this team does ask a lot of their corners. They play a lot of that top-down zone stuff, and then they blitz a lot. So they really do leave these guys in compromising situations. And Riley Moss has really held up quite well. He actually just had his worst game of the season against Bryce Young and the Panthers. But man, you go back like week 3 against the Bucs was like a dominant performance from Riley Moss. He did a great job handling Chris Godwin in that game. Had a beautiful pass breakup. And then a couple weeks later, he had a really nice interception against the Raiders. So you're seeing just the completeness in his game. He can play the boundary, he can protect the deep ball, he can find the ball with his back turned, which is not a trait every corner has. And he's just a really nice piece that this team desperately needed. So I wanted to shout him out as the super stud among a large list of players going up for Denver here from the first half of this season. But let's flip over to the offensive side of the ball first, and then we'll go back to the defense. Bo Nix is going to go +2 here. Thank God we don't do studs and duds after the first couple of weeks, because there was panic, frankly, with how bad he looked in the Seahawks game in week 2. Can't even remember who they played week 2. It seems like forever ago at this point, especially when Bo Nix has kind of erased the memory of those first 2 games and really settled in as advertised. The things on Bo Nix that were massive strengths were protecting the football, an incredibly low turnover-worthy play percentage in his time at Oregon. I believe a 0.9 turnover-worthy play rate is the number that comes to my mind. Thinking back to the draft analysis on him at Oregon. And in the last 5 weeks, the last 5 starts for Bo Nix, just 1 turnover-worthy play, whereas he had 5 in the first 3 weeks. So he's really settled in and reminded us that is a strength and proved that he can get back to being that guy in the pros. But then on top of that, his ability to get out of pressure, avoid sacks, such an underrated athlete, make throws on the run, very Brock Purdy-esque was a big comp I had on Bo Nix. You're seeing a lot of that here, especially in recent weeks. And his arm actually has stood out to me even more than it popped to me at Oregon for one reason or another. His velocity just seems a little bit better. So I have been really impressed by Bo Nix. The only holdup here, why this isn't any more than a +2, is I think we do have to be realistic about the defenses he's been facing. This great stretch that he's on has come against the Raiders, the Chargers, the Saints, the Panthers. He's going to have to go to Baltimore as a 9.5-point favorite this weekend. And hey, maybe when we do studs and duds next week, if he balls out, we'll give him a little bit more love in other divisional episodes, as we did for Marvin Harrison, making up some ground in yesterday's episode. But I did want to at least point that out. But I'm a believer in Bo Nix. I kind of was, I would say, at least somewhat higher on him than consensus. I thought he'd have a pretty solid rookie season, and he's really settled in after a rough couple weeks where a lot of people wrote him off. But at running back, Javonte Williams, he's just been on this kind of steady decline. Just hasn't been efficient this year, man. And that Raiders game looked like maybe he was breaking through, looked like the old, healthy Javonte Williams. 6 broken tackles in that game and just really, really flashed. And then the next week he had one of the worst games of his career. Fumbles, not going anywhere on the ground. And I don't think overall, with the exception of that Raiders game, we just haven't seen the juice. The biggest trait on Javonte Williams was always his contact balance, his ability to shake tacklers, and really it just hasn't been there for a couple of years now. And it just kind of feels like we're trending towards the end of Javonte Williams in Denver and potentially as a starter in the NFL. It's not that he's been so horrible, but you pair the fact that his biggest strength hasn't been too much of a strength for him for a while now, with a guy who frankly doesn't have the best vision. He does get very bounce happy, and you just end up with a very inconsistent runner. But at wide receiver, the rookie, 7th round pick, right? Maybe 6th, but Devon Vele out of Utah, big-bodied, kind of Tim Patrick type for the Broncos fans out there. He's filled in nicely, and plus 366 to a 69 here. Week 1, he actually had 8 receptions on 8 targets. They were all just like underneath check down out routes. But since then, he's had much more of like an intermediate role. He's caught some comebackers over the middle, shown that size and that ability to win in the intermediate. So he's a nice fit. They like these bigger bodied receivers that can run digs, run comebackers, and block. And he's done that for them as kind of a nice wide receiver 4. And then at tight end, Lucas Kroll, he flashed for me when I was getting ready for the Broncos deep dive this offseason. He played a little bit late last season, and with injuries to someone like Greg Dulcich, Kroll has re-entered the picture here, and he's done everything they ask of him. He's a good blocker. He's caught all of his quality targets. Doesn't have a drop this season on a nice 23-yard completion or reception, rather, against the Saints. So nothing crazy here, but he's an athlete out of Pitt that was always underutilized in college, came into the league undrafted in 2022. Just a guy that kind of stands out, worth shouting out here in this series. But then as we get to the offensive line, the right tackle situation has kind of been a blessing for this team. They have some depth and some very much under-the-radar players that have really stepped up. It started with a Mike McGlinchey injury kind of out the gate. Alex Palczewski comes in week 3, week 4, starts rotating with Matt Parrott week 5. And all these guys have played really well, whoever it's been at right tackle. Palczewski in a couple of starts and then rotating with Parrott. He gave up just 3 pressures on 97 pass blocking snaps. Those are really good numbers. This is a guy that was a really highly graded pass protector at Illinois, someone I liked that I don't think should have gone undrafted. So, he's been a guy I've kind of shouted out a couple deep dives in a row where it's like, hey, if this guy gets an opportunity, he could be a nice swing tackle or something. And that's standing out so far this year. He looks like a nice depth piece that can step in and not be a turnstile is basically what you're looking for in backup offensive lineman. But hey, they get Matt Parrott in the mix. They kind of rotate him with Palczewski. And God, he was moving people. He ended up actually, I believe, starting the whole game against the Raiders. I don't know if Palczewski was hurt or if that was a coach's decision, something they saw with the matchup. But Matt Parrott, more of a bigger name. He was a 3rd-round pick by the Giants that never really settled in. But that Raiders game was the game Javonte Williams was running all over the place. And Matt Parrott in that game, a 90 PFF run block grade, held up pretty well as a pass blocker as well. Did get credited some pressures against him when Bo Nix started scrambling around. And it's those pressures where like you're doing your job and then the quarterback either steps up into pressure or he rolls out and the edge kind of leaves his block outside the pocket where you don't really ding the tackle for it, but it does show up as a pressure. He had a couple of those on his record there in that Raiders game. But overall, this is a guy that I've always believed in the traits. Obviously, the Giants haven't done the best job developing offensive linemen, especially over the last 4 years. So very curious to see him in Denver with Sean Payton, who's kind of always been able to figure out the offensive line, so that's definitely encouraging. And then Mike McGlinchey himself has played very well in his 4 starts, kind of the most efficient pass blocking season he's maybe ever had. Small sample size, but definitely just encouraged by the 3 guys that have all stepped up at that right side of the line. And then Quinn Minor's doing his thing there too. Quinn Minor's, he's been getting better year after year after year. Fans of the channel know I love myself some Quinn Minors, have consistently called him underrated. He gets the big contract extension this offseason and just continues to make Denver look right for drafting him, for paying him. He has always been a great run blocker. That hasn't changed. But you've seen the year-to-year just increases in his pass blocking efficiency. And this year, he's given up just 6 pressures through halfway through the year. To contextualize that, that's on pace for about a 13 pressure season. And last year, he gave up 23 pressures. So he's basically doubled his pass blocking efficiency. And it's just been such a good pick for Denver. This guy had no business going in the 3rd round when he did. Love myself some Quinn Minors. Then at center, these guys have stepped up. Luke Wattenberg, who was the day 1 starter, kind of figured Sean Payton was onto something. They kind of ignored that center position with Cushenberry leaving, but they like these guys. You do see this at center when you kind of have a guy you trust is going to put in the work. And I think they have a couple of those guys in Wattenberg and Forsythe. And, Wattenberg was very solid in pass protection for the first few weeks. He goes down with an injury. Alex Forsythe steps in and has actually been a much better run blocker. Not so great in terms of holding up pass blocking wise, but both these guys have been adequate options for them, if not even a little bit better than adequate, just small sample sizes. So +2 for both of those lowly rated centers. And I'm curious to see if this opens up a bit of a competition between the two. A couple of West Coast guys, Wattenberg from Washington, Forsythe from Oregon, and lowly drafted guys. Wattenberg, I think, was undrafted. Forsythe, I recall, being like a 7th round pick out of Oregon. But now we will flip back to the defensive side of things. And Zach Allen, just what a year he is having in Vance Joseph's defense. So there's some context to this, and I'll get into that, but he has 10 more pressures, 43 pressures, than any other interior defensive lineman in the entire NFL. 43 pressures. The next one down is Chris Jones, then Quinnen, then Dexter Lawrence, Cam Hayward. He's up there with the superstars at the position. Now, there's a lot of context to that. He has played a shit ton. He is out there all the time, and it's a testament to his stamina and effort. But he does have about a game's worth of snaps more than any other defensive tackle in the league. He's got 316 pass rush snaps. Next down is Matabuike at 271, so that's 45 difference there, and then you're dropping down to about 250 after that. So he has played just an unbelievable amount for an interior player. And I think you also can contextualize this by saying he just doesn't get double teamed at the rate that some of these top guys do, because I don't think the league quite respects him at that level. So, and they run a lot of stunts and games to get him some of those free pressures as well, where he's just looping around and doing his thing. He's not actually beating someone, but he's registering a pressure. So they're doing a lot to help him get that production, but he's still, for example, 17th in PFF pass rushing grade, which is still extremely impressive when he's playing that much. Now, his run defense grade, on the other hand, 43.7. He's 105th in run defense grade. I actually don't put that on Zach Allen. I think Zach Allen is good at getting off blocks and is a good run defender, but two things. He's 285 pounds. He's playing in a bit of a hybrid end role where they're asking him to play a lot of 3-tech. It's just a really tough ask for who he is. So I don't even really hold that against him, but he's also on the field constantly. So he's not only undersized, he's exhausted. So the fact that he's even out there, he's 4th in the NFL in run defense snaps this year. And he leads the NFL in run stops as well. So he's still making plays. It's just he's getting a lot of negative plays as well, where he is giving up a lot of ground. But that's obviously something they will live with in this system. So you're just blown away with him. He came into the league as an edge rusher, and it's been fun to see his development over time. I remember I had a first-round grade on Zach Allen as an edge rusher, and he's just had a long trajectory to kind of basically redeem that. If you look back on his career, you would take him in the first round, I think, based on what he's been. He was a good player for the Cardinals. He's been a really good player for the Broncos, bordering on like a great player. So he's just having a career year. Such a great decision by this front office to let Draymond Jones go and sign Zach Allen, something a lot of people questioned. But Vance Joseph was familiar with Zach Allen, believed in him. He's put him in a great position to succeed. So he was another candidate for this team's super stud. He's been a big contributor, if not the biggest contributor, to this defense's success this season, outside of Pat Surtain. But his running mate there, Malcolm Roach, is having a really good year. He is someone that is kind of the inverse. He is also undersized, but he's actually much better on earlier downs, getting off blocks, being a good run defender. Not so much the north and south disruptive ability to be a pass rusher, but that's fine. They have plenty of guys to do that. John Franklin Myers has lived up to his rating as well. They've got a lot of other edge rushers that get in the mix here, but they don't really have a consistent highly gap disciplined defensive tackle like Malcolm Roach. And he's kind of I look at him as kind of the predecessor to everything we talked about for the draft nerds out there with Byron Murphy, where he's an undersized guy out of Texas, but just plays the run stout with incredible discipline and just good core strength relative to his size. He is just low to the earth and stocky and tough to get off the ball. He's been really good against the run. So they're just a really nice complement, and they're both kind of that undersized three-tech that are just a handful for opposing offensive lines to deal with. But then on the edge, I think most of these guys have lived up to their billing. I will shout out Jonah Ellis real quick just because he's playing pretty solid for a third-round rookie, but I've got him as a 71 rating, and I was a big fan of Ellis, so I can't say he's exceeded my expectations on him, but he's definitely made an impact in this group. But Jonathan Cooper has really continued to impress, man. He's always been a good run defender, but he's continuing to do that at an incredible level. Second in the NFL in defensive stops behind TJ Watt. But over the last couple of years, he's really shown that he can rush the passer. He's not the most traitsy guy, but he's got a little bit of everything. He's got balanced size. He's got a little power. I think, just as he's played so much, he's a high work ethic type of dude out of Ohio State. He's developed some different, finesse moves with his arms that he can mix some stuff up and get after the quarterback. He's having another productive year there. 30 pressures, 6 sacks on just 213 pass rush snaps. He's just a really, really nice player. I think he is, in my mind, entering the territory. For a long, long time, even going back to like Washington, I said Preston Smith is like the prototype number 2 edge rusher. Like if you talk about you need a number 1 and you need a number 2, Preston Smith's kind of been that line for a long time. Jonathan Cooper might be that new bar, this sort of like Andy Dalton line, if you will, for edge rushers in many ways. But yeah, I've been impressed. And then into the linebacker group, God, this has been a blessing for this Broncos team. They've had some really bad injuries there, right? They had Drew Sanders goes down, was like the first big injury in the entire NFL. Second round pick they had big expectations for this year. They lose him, and then 3 games into the year, they lose the very talented Alex Singleton. So they're scrambling here, but these guys have really filled in nicely. Cody Barton, who they picked up off the street when Sanders went down, he's been having a career year in terms of run defense. That was like, it's been night and day. It's like he's taken his sort of falling out to heart. He really struggled in Washington last year after Seattle didn't believe in him. He's just seemingly kind of playing with nothing to lose. Maybe Alex Singleton's been able to get in his head a little bit like, hey, here's what I do to be this maniac on the football field. But he's just had some really big plays against the run. Had an awesome game against the Saints where he had a sweet sack, a sweet pass breakup, just really standing out. And deserves to go up for it. I don't know if he keeps it up or not. He's had a pretty rocky first 5 years to his career, but this is the nature of linebacker in the NFL. It takes a lot of guys as much as 6 years to figure something out. So he's playing well. And then Justin Sternad, he's been someone on my radar for a long time. He's stuck around here in Denver. He was a 5th-round pick in 2020, had really impressive tape, but someone that really dealt with a lot of injuries at Wake Forest. So, he misses the 2020 season, 2021, he gets on the field in year 2, rotational / spot starter, plays 300 snaps, and he's continued to stick around through 2023, through 2024. This year, again, as a backup, makes the team, so they've kind of believed in him through, different coaching staffs, all this stuff. Finally gets this opportunity, and my God, good for him, man. He looks awesome. 21 defensive stops in 5 games. He's plugged in right in when Alex Singleton went down. He's got just a 3% missed tackle rate, that's like ideal. That's like prototype ideal. That's probably pretty close to like where Bobby Wagner is at on his career, for example. So like he's been a super secure tackler. He's been all over the field. 86.5 PFF run defense grade. That can be a spotty grade for sure. But when you're up into the high 80s, you're doing something right. It's been really fun to see him out there. This is what it's all about with Sean Payton and these Broncos, is finding pieces like this. So he if he can stay healthy, he could actually be a legit piece. I think he's got the athleticism. He's always had the tape, at least going back to his college days. And this is about the breakout age for a lot of linebackers in the NFL, 28 years old. So, yeah, I'm just excited for him, man. That's what this series is all about as well, is finding guys like this. Excited to see if he can keep this up. But then into the secondary, this group's been really special. Maybe the biggest core reason for this team's success, the reason they're able to blitz so much, is because they can trust these guys to hold up on the back end. We already talked about Riley Moss, but Pat Surtain has been just so good. He's been quite possibly the best corner in the NFL this year. And I think with Sauce showing finally some weaknesses in his game and having a bad year, you could easily say that Pat Surtain is the best corner in the NFL today, just based on his track record. We talk so much about volatility at this position. Who doesn't really have volatility is Pat Surtain. He's basically been top 5 since the second he took the field. So he's just had some incredible performances. The 2 interception game against the Raiders shut down guys like Garrett Wilson in the Jets game, Mike Evans in the Bucs game. He's only been targeted 17 times this year. Like, teams just can't have anything or aren't seeing any good looks against him. And when they do put the ball in his territory, he makes you pay for it. So, yeah, he deserves to get a bump. And then Jaquan McMillan continues to be a really solid to good. I'm going to stop short of saying great slot corner, just because there has been still, like we saw last year, there's some weeks where you can get him, and there's some weeks where he's just kind of swarming you and all over the place in coverage. And he has actually continued to just miss a lot of tackles. That's something I would really love to see him clean up. He's a little bit smaller, so I don't know if that's something that could be something he improves on. But he is just really twitchy, really instinctive, and continues to prove that he is a starting slot corner in the NFL, and a really good one at that. So +2 for Jaquan McMillan. And then the free safety, Brandon Jones. This was a move I was critical of for Denver. I didn't see the vision here. This is a guy that has always kind of played kind of a strong safety role in Brian Flores's inspired Dolphins defense. Kind of always viewed him as a strong safety type, not a ton of speed or athletic ability. But Denver's actually put him much more in the post, a lot of free safety when they do these cover 3 blitzes, a lot of the split safety quarter stuff, just doing a completely different role than he's played in years past, and he's clearly more comfortable. And I wasn't familiar with his game. I didn't realize he had the zone IQ and the eyes in the deep post that he's showing this year. He's had some really impressive plays on the ball, wonderful interception against Baker Mayfield in that Bucs game. And he's just been, honestly, a better presence for their run defense in this type of role. Based on how Miami used him and the fact that he ran slow for one reason or another, I always assumed he was one of these kind of stockier 5'11", 205-pound safeties. He's actually listed at 6'1", 190, which is much closer to what you describe as a free safety. And it makes sense, actually, now looking back on it. Like, okay, there's a reason he couldn't hold up in the Josh Metellus, Kyle Duggar role in that defense. He doesn't have the size for it, but you put him out in space a little bit more, and you see some of the tackling ability and run support coming downfield show up much more. So he's been a really good presence for Denver, a great signing. I was wrong, and now he's like a bargain for them. It's like 3 years, $22 million. They paid him, projecting him into a different role, and it was just a really good move by Denver. So things are absolutely trending up for the Broncos, and I'm excited to see with the schedule kind of becoming real now. They've had, let's just be honest, kind of a joke of a schedule this year. I'm curious to see if, now that they've kind of raised the floor with a lot of these role players, how can they hang in terms of the playoff picture? So there's your Broncos. Next up, we have the Los Angeles Chargers. It's actually kind of fun. Just a little sidebar here. It's kind of fun how the Chargers and Broncos are so similar to each other as organizations right now, minus the fact that, the Chargers have a guy named Justin Herbert. But outside of that, you have really two like legacy coaches that have come in to kind of try and restore the culture, and so far are doing a very good job of that. Both these teams, as of this recording, sitting in wildcard spots. But likewise with the Chargers, there's a lot of players to talk about here, and they're doing a lot of soul searching this year, trying to find out who their chess pieces are. But as far as who the highlight player I have for the Chargers is, it is not someone you expected here. Poona Ford, the defensive tackle free agent signing, comes over from Buffalo, 28 years old. He had seemingly been entering the journeyman stages of his career. I don't know about that. I wouldn't be surprised if the Chargers lock him up for a contract extension here. And, you go back 4 years ago, he looked like a legitimate starting defensive tackle in the league. But the reason I wanted to highlight him instead of these rookies that are playing so great, or even Justin Herbert, who's been playing better lately, is this is really what stands out to me about what has changed about the Chargers is their run defense. It has plagued this team for years and years and years. And you look down the board, it's been a team effort, but there's not a ton of guys that truly stand out in terms of who individually is making that big impact against the run. But the one guy that really does is Poona Ford. His energy, his just anchor and play strength and ability to get into the backfield and make plays and just be an impact against the run has been a complete game changer for this Chargers run defense. And he's doing a little bit as a pass rusher too. Credit to him there. He had a beautiful spin move on Cesar Ruiz in the Saints game to get in there for a sack. So he's really been a nice signing for the Chargers. And I've always loved Poona Ford, but he had a bit of a falling out in the league. It is really fun to see him kind of restoring his name towards being, a really just good starting defensive tackle in the league. If he repeats the second half of the year, what he's done so far this season, I think he can get back to where I had him maybe 4 years ago as like a 78, 79 rating type of guy. But let's talk about the offense. I do at least want to hint at Justin Herbert. Not going to go up, but it is worth noting just how well he's played in the last 2 weeks. He hasn't just played up to his 87 rating that puts him as the tied for the fourth best quarterback in the league. He hasn't just played up to that the last 2 weeks. He's well exceeded that the last couple of weeks and really started to open your eyes for what he could be inside this Chargers organization as Greg Roman and him are kind of figuring themselves out with this motley crew of many new look wide receivers. So it's really encouraging to see. And again, when we come to studs and duds at the end of the year, if Herbert's playing like this, he's going to get a massive boost at the end of the year. And really, I mean, it's just 2 games against some pretty bad defenses, but I'm just saying if he plays at this level and keeps it up and keeps the Chargers in playoff contention, we are going to have to start having those conversations about Herbert entering these sort of, tier 1 quarterback conversations. I have been really impressed. So his rating's not changing because the first 5+ weeks of the year really was quiet, didn't do too much, but definitely heating up and worth a shout out. But let's talk about these wide receivers. A lot of movement here. Ladd McConkey, as advertised. What a fun rookie this is. Really proud to say I kept him in my top 5 wide receivers in this draft class. People said, he's limited upside. He's a slot guy. Can you really take him in the first round? I'm like, Yeah, you can, because he's not just a slot guy. Yes, he's doing most of his damage from the slot for the Chargers, but a lot of slot wide receivers don't have vertical ability and legit speed and release off the line of scrimmage like Ladd McConkey has. He is cooking dudes deep. He had a huge touchdown last week, goes over the defender, showing a little bit of contested catch ability, and then outrunning the defense. He really does have the whole repertoire in his bag as a wide receiver. We haven't seen him do it too much from the outside. This just flashed into my mind, and I'm probably going to regret saying this, but it reminds me a little bit of like Justin Jefferson coming out. He's not going to be as good as Justin Jefferson. I feel pretty confident in saying that, but good in the sense that he's doing everything you need to see from a complete wide receiver as a slot guy, that you could say, well, if you did stick him outside, he could probably do a lot of that stuff. And honestly, that brings me back to a comparison I made when the Chargers took him to a Keenan Allen, but he's like a faster Keenan Allen. He's not quite as big, but he's in that conversation for like, this guy can be a legitimate number one wide receiver. You pair that with Joe Alt, who we'll talk about in just a little bit. He's just been really, really fun. So Ladd going up, he can't go up too much because I had him as a 76 rating as a rookie. I talked about how high floor this guy is, and you've seen that out the gate coming off his best game as a Charger. Massive 2-touchdown performance. He had a big catch down, big contested catch down in the red zone for a touchdown too. So yeah, doing it all. And then Quentin Johnston, it's a bummer he got hurt because he was really building up something here. Obviously their first round pick here, a ton of talent. And you know, he's got a long way to go after such a rough rookie season, but he's kind of just checking some boxes this year, doing what they're asking of him. They're giving him some of those easier designed touch looks you want to see, things like crossing routes and bubble screens and stuff, and showing some of that run after catch ability. But he's doing more than that. He doesn't have any drops this year. He had a really nice kind of over-the-shoulder contested catch touchdown against the Panthers, showing that frame a little bit. You know, if he's improving his ball skills, you can really start to get somewhere with him, especially as Ladd has emerged as such a player for them. Quentin maybe doesn't have to live up to that, you know, first wide receiver drafted pedigree and just be a good number 2, number 3 wide receiver, at least get some explosiveness and some good play out of him. They're definitely trending towards that being the case with Quentin. And then once he can establish that, we'll go from there. But you got to be encouraged how he's responded to such a rough rookie season. And then Simi Fehoko, just a +2 here. He's made some catches. He's gotten into the lineup. I liked Simi coming out as this kind of interesting, big-bodied, vertical threat. He's definitely had some moments of frustration as well as some dimes from Herbert that you wish Fehoko would come down with. So nothing crazy here, but +2, a 65 to a 67. Maybe he can settle in as, you know, a capable depth piece for them. But then Joshua Palmer is going to come down. It's one of those cases where I think 77 is just a little bit too high. Obviously a big opportunity to really break through as kind of this team's number 1 wide receiver, and it's actually gone in the wrong direction. He just hasn't been very efficient. He's had 3 drops this year, as many as he had last year total, so he just hasn't really delivered for this team. Joshua Palmer's fine, but I didn't think he was even playing up to that 77 rating I had on him coming into the year. One other note here, by the way, underneath Justin Herbert there in the notes section is the running back, J.K. Dobbins. If we did this after the first month, Dobbins for sure would have gone up, but the last month or so, not a lot of juice there. I think he's sitting at like 2.5 yards a carry or something close to it. I don't think it's necessarily a run blocking problem. He's just not necessarily breaking through the hole, not really being dynamic like he was in that first game where he broke onto the scene against the Raiders. You know, really fun performance, but since then, it's been pretty quiet for J.K. Dobbins. He does have a nice 78 rating on him because of how he produced pre-injury for the Ravens. So I'm actually curious what Chargers fans think of this. Is 78 right, too high, too low? It seems about right for now, but we're definitely going to need to get a final full evaluation for the end of season studs and duds on kind of where J.K. Dobbins is, and is he sort of the future starter for the Chargers. But then at tight end, we've got Will Dissly, just a freaking good tight end, man, in the true sense of the word. He's come in and, you know, the main reason they signed him was to improve their blocking. They've had guys like, Everett and Parham, who just aren't really blockers, and it's hurt their run game. Well, they bring in Dissly, who's 265 pounds, a great track record of blocking, and he has reset the culture up front from that position group. And then man, he has had some good games in there too. What was that? The Cardinals game? He was like the number one wide receiver for the Chargers, catching everything, doing some stuff to kind of help move the chains. So he's just been a really nice player, deserved to go up 1 to a 77. Then we'll shift our focus to the offensive line. So Rashawn Slater having a monster season. Now, the Chargers are also similar to what we've talked about with the Broncos, where their schedule just hasn't really been much this year. They haven't faced that many great pass rushes. So where this might have been a +2 for someone like Rashawn Slater, you go down the board and say, all right, he's going against the Raiders, whatever they had at edge opposite of Max Crosby. You got Carolina, an egregiously bad edge rush room in there. His his lowest graded game of the year was against Pittsburgh, against Alex Highsmith. He did play very well in that lineup, in that matchup. Then you got, Denver. Those edge guys are all right. Arizona, horrible edge room. New Orleans, a horrible edge room. So, again, he deserves credit for playing well and dominating in these matchups. But again, where it might have been a +2 for Rashawn Slater, because he really has been that hyper efficient, giving up just 1 pressure a game. We'll see if he continues that level of efficiency as the level of competition increases. Joe Alt, on the other side of things, a monster rookie season. I don't need to keep echoing the point of who these guys are facing. But it is a similar narrative where Alt has really kicked ass outside of having to play against TJ Watt, his worst outing of the season. But other than that, I mean, he has been every bit as good as advertised. This pick was compared to when the Lions took Penei Sewell to complement their franchise left tackle. And it's just, I think this pick, not alone, but it's a big part of reshaping the physicality and a big part of Herbert playing really well, because he's able to just stand in the pocket and just drop these dimes from, clean pockets that he hasn't really gotten used to having in recent seasons. So he's been great there. He's been great in the run game. Love Joe Alt. How could you not? +2 for him. Zion Johnson at left guard. He's been good this year. Still a little up and down in terms of pass protection. Want to see a little bit more consistency there, but his run blocking, it's just kind of turned a corner here. He was a guy that really missed a lot of assignments, fell off a lot of blocks, never seemed to really play with the confidence that he did at Boston College, in my opinion, where it got him drafted in the first round. But something about the Harbaugh regime, the way Roman is getting these guys coached up in the run game, he's just kicking dudes' ass up front, playing more confident, and having a lot less negatively graded run plays. So +1 for Zion Johnson. I'm a big fan of him as well. It's not all rainbows and butterflies in the offensive line, however. Trey Pipkins has played a decent amount here, some at right tackle when Joe Alt got banged up, and then some at guard. A lot at guard, actually, and he just has been something close to a turnstile for them. I had to tank his pass blocking ratings quite a bit. He is blocking the run better than he really ever has, so that's why it's only a -1 for him and not more than that. But he is someone that they don't really want to see out there right now, because he's playing at the type of level that could get Justin Herbert hurt. And a lot of Chargers fans were upset that they took Joe Alt and didn't take someone like Malik Neighbors, because, hey, we're paying Trey Pipkins to be a right tackle, and he's like a starting caliber tackle. Well, the tape kind of told you he wasn't last year. It's been even worse this year. And you got Ladd, you got Alt. The Chargers did the right thing. So while that sucks for Trey Pipkins, it's good to see that this organization made the right call there. And then at center, Bradley Bozeman, he just hasn't been good for a couple of years. The Panthers cut him, and that tells you how they thought he was playing. He definitely contributed to many of their issues on the offensive line last year, and then he comes to the Chargers this year, and they've been really able to get through him in pass protection as well. He's always been an okay run blocker, but when he's been just getting spun around as much in pass protection as he has the last couple of years, it's just kind of hard to sell him as a like solidified starter at this point. So a -2 for Bozeman. Let's talk about the Chargers defense that has been a very, very pleasant surprise. We talked about the improvements in the run defense with Poona Ford. Another player contributing there is Daiyan Henley, the year 2 linebacker out of Washington State, a 3rd-round pick that myself and many draft nicks loved. And yeah, he's just settling in nicely. They weren't sure necessarily how much playing time he was going to get because they have Perriman, they have Colson. Those guys have been in and out with injuries, but the mainstay has really been Diane Henley. And he was an older prospect too. He actually turns 25 this year. So it makes a little bit more sense why he's bringing a little bit more of a high floor to the position, even if he is young by his NFL age in year 2 here. But yeah, he's just doing a little bit of everything. I've been impressed by his gap discipline. His tackling consistency has been really good. And he's doing his thing in coverage too. He's got a couple pass breakups. He was really good at that at Washington State. This guy that used to play wide receiver. So he really has a feel there. He's a nice player. Junior Colson hasn't quite been what you could have hoped for yet. Again, he's dealt with some injuries, but Henley and Colson, that works for me. That's a really nice duo. I would be excited to see that someday, even if Perriman has been getting in the mix there as well. But then you look at the secondary. I would say this has been the biggest pleasant surprise. The run defense is more of a team thing, but the individual players in the secondary have been really, really a pleasant surprise. It starts with Christian Fulton, who's been this team's number one corner. Our guy, Asante Samuel Jr. has missed a lot of time this year, but Fulton was kind of a why the hell not addition, didn't get a lot of money, really had a rough couple of years for the Titans, but he's come in a completely different system, and it's really been a fit for him. He's just been kind of shut down, to be honest. He's been targeted just 16 times in 7 starts for 9 receptions, 96 yards. He's got an interception and a pass breakup. I'm a little bit hesitant because we know the volatility of this position, and this has been a guy that has had a lot of ups and downs throughout his career. Could just be in a good trend right now, or he's figured something out in this new system. But either way, it's been a really nice signing for him, and he's been a massive contributor to their defense being better than we certainly expected heading into the year, as has rookie Cam Hart. Just big physical corner, smart dude out of Notre Dame, and again, just has been a really nice fit here, playing in a very zone-heavy system. He just kind of gets it. He's been in the right place. He's been solid in terms of helping out with the run defense on the perimeter. That's something they're pretty much always going to ask from these guys in the Harbaugh era. Like that's certainly not a surprise from Cam Hart based on what we saw from him at Notre Dame. But he's got an 81 PFF run defense grade. He's missing just 6% of his tackles, which, if you're under 10 as a corner, you're doing a good job. So yeah, he's been really good in 4 starts there with Samuel out. But then Jasir Taylor in the slot, he's missed a few games here in the middle chunk of what we've seen so far this year. But God, he's been money, man. And he's a year 2 7th round pick last year, I think. And he wins this starting slot job and has just done such a good job. He's been keeping everything in front of him in coverage. But what's the most impressive thing from Jasir Taylor is in 5 starts, 0 missed tackles. That is really impressive. Think of all of the compromising situations these slot corners get put in, trying to defend RPOs and bubble screens and outside runs and all that. He's been just wrapping everybody up. Again, 0 missed tackles this year in 5 starts. Extremely impressed there, and his coverage has been good. So he's kind of been a piece that they have unlocked here. And then another guy that they went and got kind of at the cut deadline, Elijah Molden, who learned this system in Tennessee because Tennessee also brought in a Mike McDonald-inspired defensive scheme, but he didn't make the team because Tennessee felt it was necessary to bring in Jamal Adams and Quandre Diggs. We'll get to Tennessee later. But yeah, they made a mistake letting Elijah Molden go, misidentifying him and what he could be as a safety in this very system. He's been awesome for the Chargers. He's kind of inarguably been the best safety on the Chargers when you have a couple of guys you like in Alohi Gilman and Derwin James. He's got a pair of interceptions. One fell right in his lap, but another one, he jumped the middle of the field, picked off Bryce Young in that Panthers game. He's been tackling extremely well. I just love how he fits. They run a lot of 3 safety stuff. All 3 of these guys really start with Derwin, Gilman, and Molden, and he's been an awesome addition for this Chargers team. The definition of what this year was all about for the Chargers is going to find some pieces on the cheap that can be legitimate contributors for you. Now, Derwin James just continues to drop and drop and drop. Once upon a time in the 90s, feels like the last couple of years we've been lowering Derwin, and he's just not that dude anymore. He's still a great presence in run defense. Talk about someone that is contributing to the Chargers' success, slowing down the run to a degree that they haven't for a long time. Still deserves a ton of credit for doing that. But goodness, he's been targeted 23 times this year. He's allowed 20 receptions, 211 yards on those. He's allowed 2 touchdowns. And what's even most damning about that is 0 pass breakups, 0 interceptions. He's been one of, if not the worst coverage safeties in the league this year. The tape doesn't lie at this point, man. I think the injuries have racked up on him. This used to be the guy that would man up Keenan Allen in practice and win a lot of those matchups. That's just not who Derwin James is anymore. And it's eerily similar to what happened with Jamal Adams. 2 guys that once upon a time were kind of neck and neck for the 2 most physical, dominant, big safeties in the league. I don't think he's as bad as Adams became, but it just, I love Derwin, but he's on the cover of my Twitter banner and all that. I've got a jersey. He's one of my favorite players in the league, but you just got to be honest about how he's covering for the position right now, and it's not good at all. But then the punter, J.K. Scott, has been one of the best punters in the league. It's been a great pickup from Green Bay here for the Chargers. Leads the league in hang time yet again this year, so he's up there now towards one of the best punter ratings in the game. But let's move on to the Kansas City Chiefs, and their super stud is Leo Chenal. How does the league keep letting the Chiefs get these guys? There was no world where Leo Chenal, with what he was coming out of Wisconsin, should have fallen to the 3rd round. The linebackers that were taken ahead of him is an embarrassment to the NFL. It started with the Packers with Quay Walker at the top of the board. The pick before it, the Dolphins picked a guy that barely got on the field in Channing Tindall from Georgia. There's a bunch of 2nd-round picks that have not done what Leo Chenal has done in the league. This dude is a beast, and that was written all over his tape. I cannot understand it, but the Chiefs benefit. They didn't even need a linebacker when they took Leo Chenal, but they're like, yeah, this dude's a monster. We want him on our football team. And a big theme for this Chiefs conversation here is, just like we talked about with the Chargers, the Chiefs have turned into one of the best, most dominant run defenses in the league. They are 2nd in run defense DVOA this year, which is a huge turnaround and difference from this year's Chiefs team to last year's Chiefs team. In the regular season last year, that was a way that you could beat the Chiefs, was running the ball on them. They were, I think, 27th in run defense DVOA last year. Now, the signs of this were there. They really turned it on in the playoffs, but it was a question of, is that an effort thing? Are they saving their gas for later? Are they going to go back to being a bad run defense when the season starts again? And no, the playoff run was a feature, not a bug. And I think Leo Chenal's ever-presence in this linebacker trio and the ways that they use him and to get all these linebackers on the field is a huge part of that. This dude is one of the most menacing run defenders in the league, full stop. Now, we can't rate him up all the way up into the 80s because he only plays 20 snaps a game. He's in 3 years only played about a season's worth of snaps. But he's big, he's incredibly fast, he loves to hit, he blitzes, and just the definition of a heat-seeking missile. And you're seeing some of the other aspects of his game come along too. He's done more in coverage this year than he ever has. And it's only a matter of time before we talk about Leo Chenal as what my pro comp on him was, which was Demario Davis. This was, I chickened out. He was my LB2 in that draft with a 1st to a 2nd round grade. I put Devin Lloyd ahead of him, who's really the only other linebacker in that draft that's played good. But Leo Chenal is the best linebacker out of that 2022 draft at this point, in my opinion, even if he doesn't have the production of a Devin Lloyd. I really do believe it's only a matter of time before either the Chiefs have to make him a full-time starter or he might get a massive bag of money after next season to go be like a featured linebacker for somebody next year. He's just been really, really good. But let's talk a little bit about the offense. Not a ton to say here. I mean, a lot of guys have been getting hurt, and then it's just the guys that we know are good kind of playing like the guys that we know are good. But they picked up Kareem Hunt He's been a nice addition for them. He's keeping the chains moving. He has almost no explosiveness left in the tank, but still a lot of contact balance and good vision. He's filled in nicely as they wait for Isaiah Pacheco to get healthy. Rashee Rice deserves a shout, a +1 for him. Still mostly just doing what he did last year with that crazy low average depth of target, catching slants, manufactured touches, racking up a lot of volume. But right before he got hurt, he did something that really caught my attention. I don't even remember. I think it might have been Cam Taylor-Britt in the Chiefs game. But don't quote me on that. But he cooked a DB off of press coverage, caught a ball up the seam, did a little bit of what he did at SMU, working on the outside a little bit. And it was a bummer that he went down, because that was something I really had my eyes on, is like, okay, is Rashee Rice going to not just dominate underneath all these zone coverages and stuff, but can he actually start winning on the outside on big downs too? Going to be cool to have, be able to watch DeAndre Hopkins here and maybe pick up some tricks of the trade there and come back strong next year. But definitely deserved a little bit of love. I mean, he's just so explosive, really, in a way that you just didn't see it on his SMU tape, because they would just stick him outside and have him run up and down the sideline. And he's very, very Debo-esque, man. He's a really good player for the Chiefs. And then Noah Gray. They extended Noah Gray 3 years, $18 million before the year started. He's been a really nice tight end too for them, but he's, kind of making them right for paying him a decent chunk of money. Kelsey's heated up a little bit lately, but they get into 12 personnel a lot. They haven't had a great wide receiving core, but they know that they can run the ball and get heavy on teams. And Noah Gray's been a big part of that, to have another tight end he's an okay blocker, but a guy that's like a legitimate, consistent presence with good hands, has learned a lot from Kelsey, clearly, in terms of, what to look for when you see zone coverage, where to sit down, where does Patrick want you. He's just been a nice player. So +2 for Noah Gray. And then on the offensive line, Trey Smith continues to get better. Yet another one of these guys that, how did the league let the Chiefs get Trey Smith? Just mauling dudes in the run game. He's having a really good year in pass protection. They haven't paid him yet. I don't know if they can afford him. Going to be an interesting situation to monitor. Trey Smith might become the highest paid free agent in the offseason if the Chiefs can't lock him up, because they did just pay Creed Humphrey, rightfully so. He's had a career year. He's allowed, wait for it, 3 pressures in pass protection in 7 games. Compare that to last year, where he allowed 18 pressures on the season. On top of that, he's been just as good as ever in the run game, if not a little bit better. He's making it pretty hard to not call him the best center in the NFL. All respect to Frank Ragnow, but Creed, just an absolute beast. And you can continue the narrative of how the hell did we let the Chiefs get the best center in football in the second round that was clearly the best center in that draft, Brian Gutekunst. Chiefs fans, you better send your thank you letters to Packers fans if you three-peat here, or just send them anyway, because you're welcome for not drafting Leo Chanel and Creed Humphrey. That would have been the obvious picks. Anyway, not salty at all. Let's talk about the defense, the defensive line, and really a lot of pieces are contributing to this all-around grow-up in terms of run defense for the Chiefs. Tershawn Wharton, I say that, but Tershawn Wharton's going up probably more for his consistent impact as a rusher for this Chiefs team. He's done some good stuff against the run for sure, but he is more of that undersized piece. But he's had some nice pass rush wins, and he's lucky he gets to play next to Chris Jones, who demands all that attention. But Wharton's done a good job of maximizing on those one-on-ones and creating some pressure. So he's going to get a little bit of love there, +2. But then Mike Pennel, you can almost directly correlate the Chiefs' good run defense to when they've had Mike Pennel. They brought him in late last season for that playoff run, and that's when their run defense turned a corner. That's his job here, coming on early downs and oftentimes 2-gap, but set the tone up front. He's this veteran, try hard at this point, who's not going to get a ton of accolades for sure, but deserves some love here. +2 for the veteran doing the dirty work. And then on the edge, these guys have really done a good job setting a hard edge. George Karlaftis has just stood out to me. He's just kind of all over the field, man. He's so persistent. He wins as a rusher in so many different ways. And again, the run defense has been really solid for him. So a +1 for Karlaftis. Their first-round pick last year is getting on the field, making a minor impact in a rotation in a way that he didn't do last year. It's good to see Felix Eneduke Uzoma. He's got some good pass rush wins. He's been pretty solid as a run defender. rounder. So just a little bit of love for the first rounder, maybe starting to build something up there. And then Malik Herring, the 6'3", 275-pound big-bodied thumper on the edge out of Georgia. We know what those Georgia DNs do. They set a hard edge, and he's been doing that here for the Chiefs. Nothing major, 65 to a 66. He plays about 10 to 15 snaps a game, but they're valuable snaps when you want to talk about the improved run defense. And then sticking on that narrative, not to beat a dead horse here, but Nick Bolton is healthy this year. We had lowered him last year. He was playing through injuries. It probably wasn't fair to do that, but now he's back. He's another guy heading towards a massive payday. And now that we say that, that might be Leo Chanel's opportunity to get that starting, job next year. If Bolton were to leave, that definitely tracks. But yeah, Bolton's just one of the best run defending linebackers in the league. He's one of the highest IQ linebackers in the league. He's pretty solid in coverage, considering he's not the fastest guy, he's not the lengthiest guy, but he navigates the flow of traffic well and is just a good 3-down linebacker. So getting some love there. And then into the secondary. Was a bummer that Jalen Watson got hurt. I think he's going to miss the rest of the year. Chiefs fans can update us on that. But he was playing really well, kind of won that corner job. He's been duking it out and splitting reps with Joshua Williams for multiple years now. These guys came into the league together. Watson was actually drafted below Williams, who was a 4th-round pick. Watson, I think, a 7th-round pick, but two very like-minded, like-bodied players. But yeah, Watson had completely won that job, was playing really well, sticking on the outside primarily as Trent McDuffie kind of moves around, and could have been due for even larger of a breakout had he not gotten hurt. I do at least want to raise the question to Chiefs fans. I couldn't really find anything, but I did find it fascinating that Joshua Williams wasn't inserted into the lineup when Jalen Watson went down. Has he had a falling out? He's only played 89 snaps split up in 4 games. And again, I couldn't find anything. So Chiefs fans, help us out. What's going on with Josh Williams? Because it was definitely assumed that he would step in. It actually has been Najee Johnson who's filled in more reps than him. And Nazee's not playing great. So would love to hear from Chiefs fans on that one. Just wanted to put that in the notes. But then Trent McDuffie just had to go up. He's just so freaking good, so fluid and sticky in coverage, and the amount of things that they ask of him. They leave him on an island from the slot, from the outside. They need him to defend the run on early downs. He just really is a premium, do-it-all, number 1 corner, someone that isn't often brought into the conversation for who the top 5 corners in the league are. Absolutely should be, in my opinion. A +2 for McDuffie. And then the last guy we have here for the Chiefs is the kind of dime back, Shamari Connor, who's played a little slot corner, a little strong safety. Very much that PJ Williams, Mike Edwards style role where they found a guy who is a heat-seeking missile that loves to fly to the ball, takes risks, can break up passes, can man up tight ends and slot wide receivers. Kind of a positionless defensive back, but they put him in a position to make plays, and you definitely feel his presence when they get into their passing down packages. So he's just been a really nice find for them, for a front office that seemingly can find a bunch of starters on day 3 of the draft, especially in that secondary. So Chiefs are rolling, really all positive news for them. But let's finish with the Las Vegas Raiders. An easy decision for their super stud. Of course, it's Brock Bowers. Are you kidding me? This guy is so good. Already one of the most productive tight ends in the league. Already you can make a case the best route running tight end in the league. I mean, you know who he actually feels like is Cooper Kupp. The way that he kind of moves all around the slot is just a huge mismatch problem. They'll put him on the outside and he'll catch back shoulders. But what he does after the catch, it's obviously not a perfect comparison, but there is no perfect comparison for Brock Bowers. He is a positionless player. It's almost insulting to him to just call him a tight end. But I credit to the Raiders for leaning into him. He is really the best and only thing they have going for them offensively. And they've just started funneling him the football, and he has absolutely delivered. Just so efficient, working underneath, sitting down in zones, shaking man coverage, picking up just the 2-3 extra yards that he needs to convert the chains. They're subtle, but they're tough yards that he has to fight for so that they don't have to trot out this horrible run game to try and convert third downs. So, yeah, easy decision to go with Brock Bowers. But let's talk about the rest of the offense here. Gardner Minshew is going to come down. Not that he's been a complete train wreck, but he hasn't been as good as he was for the Colts last year. He is coming off his best game. He was okay against the Chiefs, but he got benched. He's got 3 big time throws to 9 turnover-worthy plays this year. Hasn't really done too much in the sense of play extension. Some of that stuff he did really well for the Colts last year. They were hoping he could kind of come in and give them a baseline starter level of play. He's played much more like a backup this year, unfortunately. And then by far the most disappointing player for this Raiders team this year is Zamir White. -4 for him. I mean, I have so many Zamir White shares in my fantasy leagues. I really thought he was going to have a really nice year, call it 1,000 yards, 7-8 touchdowns, and just be kind of the featured back here. There's just not a lot there, man. He's kind of non-committal in the run game. He just doesn't have enough juice. There's absolutely no creativity there with him. That's what stands out the most. Even when he does get into the second level, he just doesn't have the wiggle, and he doesn't seem to have the instincts to kind of set guys up to make guys miss. So if he's not efficient in terms of yards after contact, consistently hitting the right hole, he's had fumbles this year as well. If he's not consistent at that, and he's just has no elusive ability at all, and that was there at Georgia, to be fair, the lack of elusiveness. There's just not much there to speak on for Zamir White, and that's a reason Alexander Mattison has really taken this starting running back job. He's been all right. Most of his good plays have actually come in the receiving game, but it was a rough year for Alexander Mattison and the Vikings last year, and he's bounced back to a certain level. He's been okay, so a +1 for Mattison. And then not a ton else to speak of with the weapons. DJ Turner, an undrafted talent out of Pittsburgh in year 2, I believe. He's doing some gadget stuff. He's won some tough catches in recent weeks. Whatever. He's a 5'9", 204-pound kind of speedster. There's a little bit of juice there. Not too much to say there, but he has stood out to a degree. But then on the offensive line, some good, some bad. Hey, DJ Glaze, the first guy we're going to talk about here. Gotta collect our draft wins here on the channel where I can. This was a guy that really stood out to me as one of those kind of mid-range offensive tackles that I thought had sort of developmental starting potential, a lot of traits on film. Liked what I saw from him at the Senior Bowl as well. And was a guy that was just buried on the consensus board. So as I was getting down into the weeds of offensive line film, he definitely stood out to me compared to a lot of the day 3 crop. And, he ends up going in the 3rd round. A lot of people were like, what the hell? Who is this guy? And I had a 3rd to a 4th round grade on DJ Glaze. I liked him. And he has stepped in at right tackle. Thayer Munford's been unavailable for them. And he's stepped in and really played well. He held TJ Watt to a 0 pressure game. That's saying a lot. It hasn't always been perfect. There's been some pressures and blown run blocks and stuff. He's a 3rd round rookie right tackle. He's not perfect, but I definitely think there's traits there. Seems like a guy that you can keep your eye on as a Raiders fan as you're looking for something to watch this year. Hope he continues to play well, and maybe right tackle doesn't need to be a need for you as you head into this rebuild. I do think he has the traits and movement skills to make it as a starting tackle in the league. So you love to see that. And then the guy next to him, Dylan Parham, a lot of fuss about him playing left guard, and Carmen Brasillo, who was a really good offensive line coach, kind of forcing Parham to play left side. There's a lot of people that would say that led in many ways to the players not liking him and then moving on from Carmen Brasillo. Well, it was a case where both sides were right. Carmen Brasillo is a very good offensive line coach and did a very good job for this O-line, but Dylan Parham was right that he's better on the right side, and he's moved back to his natural position and has been really good in both phases. A +2 for Parham. We ended up lowering him last year as he struggled on the left side, so he's getting some of that back. And yeah, I think he is a franchise guard, a player I really like. And, maybe him and Glaze can be a nice 1-2 punch there on the right side of this line. Just looking for positives here, Raiders fans. But then Jordan Meredith, he has played in place of Dylan Parham, who has missed some time here. He's missed the last kind of 2.5 games. And in those 2.5 call him starts and subbing in for Parham when he got hurt, just 1 pressure. I mean, for a guy that was on nobody's radar to step in and play well, that's huge. So, at least putting his name on the mark as a potential quality backup in the league. And then we'll take it from there if he plays more. But then, unfortunately, Jackson Powers-Johnson, who's been playing at left guard, which is not what he was coming out. He was a center at Oregon, though I think he played guard the year before that. He unfortunately has not been the impact stud that certainly the Raiders and us draft people thought he would be. It was one of these guys that day 2 of the draft comes and we're like, why is JPJ still there? They take him second round, and I'm obviously not writing off JPJ, and it hasn't been a disaster, but he's been playing, and it's possible he's battling through some injuries as well. I know that has been kind of a behind the scenes frustration with him for why he fell in the draft, and he wasn't available to start the year and all that. But yeah, he's allowing a pressure every week, and he has, more notably than that, 8 penalties this year. So just not really locked in quite yet. I think he can get there, but they're waiting to see a little bit more from him, obviously. And if he can, and I still think he can, it's encouraging to see at least, okay, we got some young guys to potentially build around here, but they do need JPJ to settle in and step up. But let's talk about the defense. I just don't have a ton of guys that have stood out to me too much on this Raiders defense, but one of which is Charles Snowden. It's hard for him not to stand out. He's a 6'7" lanky edge rusher that kind of plays standing up. They'll drop him into coverage. Doing what he did at Virginia, I thought he was a really fun kind of potential role player in that sort of outside backer role, kind of the traditional sense where he's an on-ball linebacker, really not much of a pass rusher. Last week, we were breaking down some big-name edge rusher that had a 0% pass rush win rate. I can't even remember who that was, but we were throwing out the other names of players that also have a 0% pass rush win rate. And Charles Snowden was a name we brought up. He's out there for early downs to defend the run, to be a kind of chess piece on the defense, not to get after the quarterback because he doesn't really have that skill set, but he's been a nice player, setting a hard edge, using that length to the perimeter. He's just a handful. So, he was an undrafted player. I always thought he should have been drafted somewhere. This is a defense under Patrick Graham that has a lot of those Belichick influences. You think back to the Kyle Van Noys and Robert Ninkoviches of the world that love these stand-up backers. Snowden fits that mold in terms of play style, so he's found a nice fit here. And then Tyree Wilson sliding into more of a 4-eye, 3-tech type of role. He's settled in there. It hasn't been dynamic. It hasn't been what you would expect from a 7th overall pick, but in kind of like a Dietrich Wise, maybe Trey Flowers type of way, drawn back to some of those Belichick style defenses. A guy that can split gaps, make some run stops, and, provide some pocket pushing, disruptive ability as a pass rusher. They're at least getting something from him. This is a role that does make sense for him as long as this defense is of this style. So it's nice to see him at least get things on the right track. But then Robert Spillane just continues to ball out, had kind of a very borderline Pro Bowl caliber season last year. Certainly could argue he should have been in, especially when someone like Patrick Queen made it. But hey, Quincy Williams should have been in there too. Anyway, I digress. Robert Spillane's been really good. He did just go down with a lower body injury, I believe. Hopefully he can get back into the lineup, but things are just really processing well for him. He's a really nice run defender. His tackling consistency just gets better and better and better. Really nice pickup for him. They have a sort of franchise starter at linebacker there in Robert Spillane, in my opinion. He is a pending free agent, so we'll see if they agree about that. But you got to think the Steelers are kicking themselves for not identifying that they had the guy right there. They just were too busy messing around with guys like Miles Jack and Devin Bush and some other bigger names. They quietly let Robert Spillane go, and they've been okay at linebacker this year, but I think they would love to have Robert Spillane in there. But then into the secondary, hey, Jacorian Bennett has really impressed me this year. He has. Now, he's had some really ugly holding calls when he's gotten cooked, so that has saved some really big completions that would have shown up on the stat sheet otherwise. But beyond that, he's been targeted 32 times. He's been starting the majority of this season, giving up just 14 receptions, 151 yards, which is fine. Again, the penalties have limited the yardage there, but 6 pass breakups, 0 touchdowns allowed. He's been really good. This was a super speedy corner out of Maryland, but just really slow reaction time for a corner. But things seem to be speeding up for him, and he's just playing really comfortable. Honestly, the main knock on him right now, other than a little bit of the grabbiness, is he's a putrid run defender. Teams can just run toss at him if they want, and he has got to prove that he can get off blocks, that he can track the run, and that he can finish tackles. It has been a little bit better in recent weeks, but he is missing 30% of his tackle attempts this season. Ouch. And then, hey, Isaiah Polamau, a 6'4" undrafted safety out of USC. He steps into the lineup as Marcus Epps goes down and immediately stands out. He's got kind of that long striding speed. He's made some good breaks on balls as a kind of just tall, rangy free safety. Kind of reminds me of like Rayshawn Jenkins a little bit, maybe. I don't know. I could see him maybe settling in as a starter here. Trayvon Merrick has struggled in coverage. Marcus Epps is kind of whatever. At this point, I don't know if Epps is going to come back into the lineup or not. I don't even know what his injury is. But at this point, you'd think you just roll with Polamau and see what he can do the rest of the year and see if he's a building block for the defense. But that is going to do it for your AFC West studs and duds. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Let me know in the comments down below if there's any players you think I missed, if you disagree with any of the changes we made. Please do hit that like button on the way out if you haven't done that yet. It really does help. Make sure you're subscribed and all that. But yeah, thank you for watching. We'll see you soon. Peace out.